It's time to talk LSU baseball with Mike Scarborough and Kendall Rogers of D1Baseball. This is Batter Up.
All right, welcome in our second edition of Batter Up. Kendall Rogers in the house, and we're doing it Thursday morning, a little late, and thanks to Jay Johnson and his 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock start times.
In AT&T.
We're gonna yeah, in AT&T. That's what I was about to get to. Cell service this morning. Everything's been pushed back, so we're bumping right up against that 1 o'clock first pitch, and really excited today to get to see Gage jump. Of course, we're brought to you by attorney Kenneth P. Haines, and Gage jump, Kendall. We saw him in one inning, and I swear, man, like he was obvious to me all weekend. That was the standout. We saw him in one inning, faced 3 batters, 2 strikeouts, and he looked like a guy who was in super regional form right off the bat.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think back to when we were talking last week, and one of the things I mentioned was that Jay in the fall was really high on Gage jump. He basically said, like, hey, if this guy can stay healthy, like, I think he has a chance to be extremely special. And I think you saw that over the weekend. Came out of the bullpen, threw strikes, got strikeouts, and was up to 95, 96 with his fastball. That's a great development, because this is a guy that Mike, we weren't sure would even pitch opening weekend. And actually, I had heard a couple of weeks ago he may not pitch for several weeks. So the fact that he, A, was out there, and B, looked the way he did is a very, very good development for this baseball team, and excited to see what he can do kind of moving forward in a larger role.
Well, Coach Johnson told us yesterday 45 to 50 pitches today, and looking forward to see that. And I'm assuming if that all goes well and no issues once he gets iced down and comes out of it, that they'll just keep adding to it. And Thatcher Hurd, who maybe didn't look as well on last Friday, he'll get the start tomorrow, and then Holman on Saturday, and then TBD on Saturday. And we have a Thursday, Friday, 1 o'clock p.m. Starts Thursday and Friday. And look,
how has there not been like a mutiny around there over that?
It's one of those deals where it's like
you win a natty, you can do that a little bit. It's kind of like Kim Mulkey could schedule a game at like 8 in the morning if she really wanted to.
You just took the words out of my mouth. It's like Kim Mulkey. You don't challenge her. You don't. When you win a national championship, you're winning the way you are. You just you take it
to some extent.
Yeah. Now go a few years without making it to a super regional, and then people start complaining about your start times and start demanding that Woodward put his foot down and not allow it. But
I always laughed. I think it was during football season. Whenever LSU, they announced the A&M LSU game time at like 11 a.m. or whatever, and it was hilarious reading like your message board and some other LSU message boards, because like fans were so mad. They're like blaming the AD, and it's like, dude, the AD has no control over when a Thanksgiving weekend game is played. But they kind of
I'm of the age, and you're not far behind me. You remember them. Jefferson Pilot football games back in the early 90s. And as bad as LSU football was back then, there were a lot of 11:30 kickoffs.
Oh, yeah.
And now with every game televised, even good teams end up playing at 11 a.m.
There's gonna be a lot. There's gonna be a lot of there's gonna be a lot of lawyers and business people that are gonna be on a meeting this afternoon about 1 o'clock.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm just saying, people watching the game, like, oh, I've got a meeting from 1 to 3, or I'll be in my office.
Exactly. I got a few questions here. In fact, since our guy, the unofficial official attorney of Tiger Bay, Kenneth P. Haines, sponsors the show, he asked this question: What happens to the 4 guys that were not on the final roster? Of course, final roster, you have to have it ready to go before the start. Do they stay with the team, practice? Do they redshirt? They just not play? They stay in school, cut? What is their status during this time when they didn't make the final roster, but they're obviously started the semester?
Yeah, that's a
Do you know what that rule is?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure most guys will stick with the team or they'll redshirt depending on kind of their classification. But most guys will stick with the team. I know there's a kid that, and I want to say he left at the holiday break, but Caleb Appleby, kind of a big right-hander, didn't have very good command, was a JUCO guy that Jay had. But he left at the break. But for the most part, the problem you run into is like if you're a pitcher, you're enrolled in school in Baton Rouge, and let's say you go through all of the January on the team and you don't make the final roster. Like you really don't have an option, like unless you go to junior college or something. Like you can't go to Law Tech and get into school at that point. So most guys are working out, practicing, redshirting if they can, and seeing if they can make the team next year.
Well, my question is, do they get to practice with the team even though they're not on the roster, or do they have to work out separately? Do they still have access to the training table?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, technically they're still in the program. It's kind of like a walk-on, right?
I guess.
So yeah, that's actually a really good question. But
I don't know how that works.
Sure I'm right on that one.
Yeah. I'll ask Jake Johnson.
Look at him throwing me a curveball. That's a tough one. But I'm pretty sure I'm accurate on that one.
Okay. Let's see what else I've got for you. Just going through some of the guys, the newcomers that we saw last weekend that were really exciting. Mac Bingham, Stephen Milam. Stephen Milam's getting a lot of play, a lot of excitement about him.
Yeah, how about that, man? Did not see that coming out of Stephen Milam, but that's great to see. How dare you not mention my man Jake Brown?
Yes.
I had hyped him up. I hyped him up. I was thinking like, okay, I hyped him up. He's totally gonna just underachieve this past weekend. And what did the dude do? He hit 600. You mentioned Milam. Mac Bingham, just a really exciting player. I like the fact he's a multi-dimensional guy. Like you look at his numbers over the weekend. He hit for average. He hit for a little bit of power. Guy hit 3 times, walked 3 more times. So like he can do a little bit of everything for you. The other thing for me, Mike, and this isn't really the returning or the newcomers, but I was really encouraged by Barrett Jones over the weekend. Yeah, he had a couple of Ks, but 3 bombs in the first few days of the season, hit pretty consistently from an average standpoint. That's great to see because that was a big question mark with him this year. I thought was, and we're still early, but I mean the big question mark with him offensively was, hey, we know he's going to hit home runs, but is the dude going to be like the Nolan McClain kid at Oklahoma State a couple years ago and have like 95 strikeouts? So far, it's been pretty good.
Ludicrous slugging percentage right now, but it's early. And, talking about early and looking, I've tuned in to you guys on YouTube and some of your analysis. And, it's one of those deals where you guys are in the business of analyzing everything, but and I didn't get a chance to compare and contrast your top 25 a week or two ago to what you did. I'm assuming you guys didn't get crazy and move a bunch of people around after week 1, despite some of the upsets and things you might have saw that. LSU had some tight ball games, but they still got. But Wake Forest lost to UNC Greensboro. You had Florida losing to St. John's. Ole Miss lost twice to Hawaii. On and on. Is that just all baseball, or there's more to read into some of those?
Yeah, I think you have to look at trends, and it's hard to find trends this early in the season. But I kind of look at consistency, and I think if you look at Florida, it was 1 game. They didn't even play another game that weekend, so it's really hard to take much from 1 game. Wake Forest, one of their loss was a midweek loss. I mean, that's going to happen. Ask LSU last year. They lost some midweek games, and it really didn't matter at all. I'm not saying they don't matter, one bit, because Jay would hate me saying that, but I'm just saying, especially early this season, it doesn't mean a lot. I do think the 2 trouble teams for me I look at right now are Ole Miss and Mississippi State. I watched a couple of Ole Miss's games over the weekend against Hawaii. Honestly, I just wasn't very impressed. And through 5 games now or 4 games, Ole Miss is hitting 180 as a team. That's not going to cut. Obviously, they're not going to hit 180 all year long, but they're off to a very slow start offensively. Then Mississippi State, last year, pitching was their issue, and what have they done? 2 of their first 5 games they've blown in the 9th inning, and that's just not a very good trend. So it is hot seat time in both of those, both Oxford and Starkville right now.
Well, Batter Up's brought to you each and every week by attorney Kenneth P. Haines. Let's hear from Kenny real quick.
Kenny Haines is a proud 1989 graduate of LSU Law School with a passion for justice. Kenny stands out as the only lawyer in the state, board certified in both appellate practice and family law. Drawing from 34 years of trial experience, Kenny has navigated the most complex aspects of real people's lives. If you need help in Northwest Louisiana with a family issue, legal issue, or a highly skilled trial attorney, call Kenny 318-222-2100. And speaking of winning, Kenny would like to recognize our 2023 national champions and congratulate coaches Kim Mulkey and Jay Johnson. Go Tigers!
Kendall, obviously after LSU gets through Northern Illinois and Stony Brook, then everything gets serious. Head to Houston next week, Rice on Wednesday. Not sure we're going to talk to you before then, but what can LSU expect in Rice next week?
Yeah, Rice has been a really interesting, program the last couple of years. Jose Cruz Jr., who obviously, everybody knows his dad, but I mean, he was an All-American at Rice, was at, Detroit Tiger organization working for AJ Hinch there, has taken over, and it's been a slog, man. They, they're not recruiting at the level they were recruiting with under Wayne Graham. They certainly don't seem to have the pitching talent that they had under Wayne Graham. So, it's been a slog for them. Jack Rydell's a really talented hitter for Rice. I would keep an eye on. I would expect LSU to have a lot of success in that game. But yeah, that's a tough job, man. It's kind of funny. I was talking to somebody about that job the other day where they were like, "Hey, what do you think is a tougher job, like Rice or Tulane?" And that was a really tough question because both those places have a lot of disadvantages. Both places are about $70,000 a year. Both of them, are great academic schools, but also in the middle of a city. You've also, LSU is 80 miles up the road at Tulane. You've got Ademan, Texas, an hour and 2 hours up the road from Rice, and then you have H across town. So it's just a really difficult job. They're just in a really rough spot. I think this is a really bad time for those guys to be having to play LSU.
So it's they're not trending or anything like the Rice of old, and
their pitching is definitely yeah, for sure. I mean, their pitching is definitely better this year, at least based on what I saw over the weekend against Notre Dame. But yeah, they've got a very long way to go to kind of restore order and, frankly, even get in regional contention.
Well, beyond what do you want to see out of LSU this weekend? Before they head off to Rice, and then of course the Astros Foundation Classic in Texas next Friday, and the Cajuns in Texas State.
Yeah, I tell you what, man. For the most part, I don't have a lot of questions. I think if you look at LSU overall, I think I want to see two things. I want to see Thatcher Hurd kind of settle down and kind of zone back in, lock back in this weekend. I think that's critical as you move forward if you're LSU. I think the other thing for me is I want to see how Cam Johnson does his next outing. He was one of the few ugly spots over the weekend, 6 strikeouts in an inning of work. That's just not going to cut it with Jay or Coach Yeski. And so I just want to see how he throws. After getting one outing in, does he, was it jitters? I mean, it would be very easy to say it's jitters. So how does he look in outing 2? Those are the 2 big questions for me. And then the last one, I hate to say that, maybe I'm not expecting him to hit 143, but, Michael Braswell really struggled offensively last year.
I was about to ask you about Braswell.
And, when he showed up at LSU, I think it might have been wishful thinking on Jay's part, going, "Hey, man, I think this guy can hit 290, 300. He's really good in the fall." But again, Braswell's one of those guys that, definitely was much better offensively in the fall, but was one of those guys that, frankly, I was kind of like, "Hey, I want to, I don't believe it until I see it." And so far, it's hard to believe in that. That's not to say I'm just throwing him to the wolves and I don't think he can turn the corner. But, yeah, 143 through 4 games is not great.
I'm looking at him at the plate, and to me, that's a big question mark. And, when he starts tweaking the lineup and moving guys around already, and you're starting to wonder, not only that, Thatcher Hurd being moved to the second day starter, how long is that going to be permanent, and where he was a year ago?
For sure. Look, I think back to last year. Well, I think back to last year, and I warned people when LSU fans were bagging on Jordan Thompson, said, "Hey, be careful what you wish for," and we're kind of seeing it right now.
Exactly. All right, Kendall, tell them they need to go to D1 Baseball. You guys, nobody does it better. They need to subscribe. Tell them how to do it. And of course, at Kendall Rogers on Twitter all weekend. And also tell us where you're heading. Are you going? Where are you heading this weekend for games?
I'll be at Round Rock this weekend. I think it's Kansas, Texas State, Kentucky. So I'll see an SEC school this weekend. Aaron will actually be up at Globe Life. You have the rematch of the infamous drop ball of Arkansas. You got Arkansas versus Oregon State Friday night in a top 10 showdown. That ought to be awesome. But yeah, man, just d1baseball.com/subscribe. We'll obviously, as the season progresses, have a ton of LSU coverage, including next week.
I'm really interested in Kentucky. I was really impressed with Kentucky in that regional last year. And I'm obviously they've lost a bit, but how good could they be? Because I think they're coached.
Yeah, I mean, Mason Moore's a really nice piece on the mound. Grant Smith at the middle is a very talented defender. They got Devin Burks. If you kind of remember him, he was kind of their loud, boisterous, leader type of catcher behind the plate. He's back. So, yeah, they've got a nice club. I don't think they're a Omaha type of club, but I think they're definitely a regional contender, potentially even a super regional contender. So, yeah, I'm with you. I'm intrigued to get some eyeballs on them this weekend.
All right, Kendall, good stuff, man. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Mike. Big up, pal.
Thanks, bud. All right, bye.